I do want to say thank you to Ben Price for his teaching of the young men here, their classes. Ben and I had a conversation a couple months ago, and I said, I think a class like that would be good for the boys. And so they've been doing praying and reading and just basically speaking out loud in front of people. And then after we was done, I told Ben it might not be a bad idea for all of us to take that class because it's done a good job. But proud of Will and proud of Dusty. I know that you all would echo the same. Dusty sounds like he's been leading prayers for about 45 years up here whenever he goes up there. He doesn't seem nervous or anything. So thank you to Ben for that. I will try to be as loud as I can, but I got competition out here tonight, out here with these cicadas. So I'll try to be loud, and y'all they're not as loud at my house as they are here. So I'm just assuming they all wanted to come to church, which I guess that's good. Tonight, our title is The Whole Duty of Man. You may remember that last week we had talked about the worthy woman. Tonight is The Whole Duty of Man is the conversation that we'll be having. This is actually a lengthier lesson. And so I'm going to teach tonight. I'm going to teach Sunday morning and then next Wednesday night. So it's kind of a 3-part thing. So most of you, I'm sure, are here on Sunday mornings, but if not, the second part of this will be this Sunday morning. I butted in on Dad, and he hadn't started yet, so I asked him if I could jump in and take it. And then in 2 weeks, we'll finish this, and then I'm going to be gone for a couple of Wednesdays out of town. So, but we're working to the end of this. I've not totally decided what our next topic will be. I've got a couple of different things that I've sort of prepped a bit for. We'll see how it goes. We're looking at Ecclesiastes. So if you want to be turned into there, you can. Unlike in previous weeks where we've maybe only had one chapter or a couple of different chapters, we're actually going to be kind of all over this book here. That's why it's going to take a long time. There's quite a few things that we're going to read, and we'll deal with that as we go forward. But Ecclesiastes, I think we can see in what Tom read a few moments ago that it explores the futility of earthly pursuits, arguing that much of human life, even with wisdom and knowledge, is ultimately a meaningless chase. Now, I want to be clear about something. I think there can be a reading of Ecclesiastes with sort of a defeatist tone, and I don't want it to be that. But as Tom read just a few moments ago, toward the end of the scripture reading, that the writer says that there's nothing new under the sun. And what I want us to consider as we read through this is that sometimes we see something happen and we think, I'm the first person to ever experience this. And from thousands of years ago, that was not true. And it's not true today. And it won't be true 1,000 years from today either. So I don't want it to be in a defeatist sense, but rather think about it in the sense of what we pursue and how we pursue it. What is our approach to pursuing one singular thing, and what is that singular thing in whenever we are considering it? Solomon is credited with writing the book, although he is typically referenced as the teacher or the preacher. That's usually how it's referred to. Those are kind of odd translations. What I was reading, they're not super clear in the translation as to what those are. I think in many ways those are sort of placeholder words, but nonetheless, he's speaking, whoever the writer is right here is speaking in a sort of clear and definitive way of instructing someone. The same way that your mother or father would have maybe taught you something, or your school teacher, or perhaps me in this case right here as well. But while acknowledging the value of wisdom and enjoying the gifts of God, Ecclesiastes ultimately determines that fearing God and keeping his commandments is the true purpose and meaning of life. And so we're going to be looking at that here over the course of the next, three, the next 3 lessons. We're going to start, and like I said, there's quite a bit of reading as we go through and questions and comments. Then I would encourage you to contribute all that you can on this as we go forward. But we're going to start in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, picking up where Tom left off a few moments ago. And if we could title this anything, we would maybe call it The Pursuit of Wisdom and Knowledge. Ben, do you care to read verse? It's 12 through 18. I think it's 2 slides, though. All right. So we're going to look at a couple of questions here just right off the bat, because I would dare say that Solomon sort of dives right into the deep end in chapter 1. There's no wading into the pool, but he gets right down to it. So what is the writer here of the book looking for just based on these 6 or 7 verses that we read? And this is an easy answer. In one word, you can probably answer it. Wisdom, right? Looking for wisdom. Now, maybe then let me ask the second question that's not there. What does that mean that he is pursuing wisdom? Understanding? Okay. All right. Anything else? Knowledge? Purpose? Good. All of those are good. All fine answers. And I do think that in some cases, all of us might read this differently. Okay. Wisdom is a somewhat odd word. I know there's a definition in the dictionary of what wisdom means, but I do think that there is a personal application of wisdom that's maybe different for me than it is for you. And it might be different from one person than another. All right. And so sometimes we can get wisdom and knowledge kind of confused. Jimmy, you mentioned knowledge, and there are things that I know, but I wouldn't describe myself as being wise about. Does that make sense? And there are things that I don't know, but I might, or that you don't know. You may not know how it works, but you might be able to give the best advice there is on it. And so those things can somewhat be different. And so his pursuit here of wisdom is what we see right here, this pursuit of wisdom and knowledge. And so the second question that we see up here, what extent does he go into his investigation? There's actually he actually sort of describes this in what we just read. And he looked everywhere is what it says. Now, I'm sure that's a figure of speech, but what the point is that he left no stone unturned, to borrow another turn of phrase right there. He was looking for, how many of you have ever, maybe you think back when you were younger, mom might have said, go find this, and you went and you was there about 10 seconds, like, I can't find it. Well, you didn't really look for it, right? Like if it wasn't jumping right off the page, you're not. So there's a pursuit there. What he's saying is, I have tried every way to figure it out. I have looked at it from every angle. That's one of the things that we sometimes see in school teaching is when kids come and tell you, multiple kids tell you multiple things. And you have to think about it from, what do I think as a 43-year-old male? What does a 15-year-old female think about this as well? Well, there's wisdom in that too, right? I have to be able to look at this from the perspective of somebody else. We see later that Solomon, we talked about, somebody mentioned it on did in one of his questions, that he proposed killing the baby, right? Well, I think he proposed that from the thought or the mind of a new mother. Well, I cannot think in the mind of a new mother because I will never be a new mother, but I can try to put myself into that. So when it says here that his investigation, he went everywhere, I think more than looking everywhere, he's trying to think about this from every possible angle as to what wisdom would be. Your thoughts on it before we go to the last question? Yeah. Okay. Philosophy is knowing that, hey, ketchup is a fruit smoothie. There's different aspects. Right. You've got to learn how to work on it. That makes sense. What are the end results here? What was his result at the end of the reading. In particular, verse 18 would be a prime place to look.
I think we come to an understanding that really the more you learn, the more sorry you are because you realize there's nothing really under your life.
Yeah.
There's nothing new to discover. God has got it all planned out. And a lot of times, the more you know, like news, you can sit and watch news, you know every single thing that's going on in this nation, this country, and all over the world. It's not going to bring you any more happiness.
Right.
It's going to bring you more sorrow and peace. Peace. So I think that's what it's kind of saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
It may result in having to deal.
Right. Right.
I know there's been many times someone asked me something. I said, well, I don't want to know. If it didn't ask, I don't want to know.
I've told that story, I think, before about the two kids that were at the high school. It was the day before, it was the Friday before spring break, and they said they were going to the courthouse to get married. And I told the principal, I was like, have you heard this? And he said, I'm trying to hear as little about that as I possibly can, because he's thinking it's 2 hours till spring break and I got to go figure this out. That's probably not a good thing. But you're exactly right, Ben. In verse 18, for in much wisdom is much grief. And sometimes when we turn the spigot on, it's hard to turn it off. You know, you learn more and then you want to learn, then you got to get more. And then you got to get more. There's sometimes on preparing lessons, especially sermons, where I'm not going to be up here more than 30 minutes. And I look at something and I say, oh, we can talk about that. And then we can talk about that. Then we can talk about that. And then all of a sudden you've been talking for an hour and a half if you're not careful. Well, I'm not saying that that's grief, but the more you know, it can lead you down other alleys as well. Some of you may have clicked on YouTube videos at 11 o'clock at night, and at 1 o'clock at night, you're still wide awake looking at the one that it led to from that. There's some grief that can come from that. There can be sort of an overwhelming sense of it.
They say that ignorance is bliss, and that's true, but the bliss is only short-lived.
Right.
It's like the scriptures and knowledge of the Bible. You cannot study the Bible, you can go on your own way of thinking, and whatever you want to do is going to get you into salvation or get you to heaven. But that bliss only comes so long, but then comes the end result, and you find out that bliss wasn't.
Sure. Any others? So let's go a little further then. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and this is verses 1 through 11. Boo, do you care to read this one? And there's actually a second slide, maybe 3 slides on this one as well. So. So if the first set of reading was the pursuit of wisdom and knowledge, those are not necessarily tactile things, but rather mental things. So he changes course a bit here, and it is a pursuit of pleasure, a pursuit of wealth. There's a handful of things that are mentioned here, and you can go through. I got this, and I got that. And he talked about he planted trees, right? He drank wine. He got singers. He had servants. All this, what we would say today, stuff. He sort of saw, well, what will stuff perhaps do for me? What is he testing at this point? Meaning what, though? So he's trying to, it's piling up stuff, right? So he's testing that if I get all of this stuff that I want, it'll make me happy. Probably the first and only person in the history of the world to do this, right? You ever known somebody that if they could, get a little bit more, they would be even happier? Yeah. No. Yeah. Uh-huh. That's a lot of falcons. So he's striving then even to add more, right? Because it doesn't really stop. It says, I added this and I added this and I added this. And so there's this sort of striving, this longing. Well, if I get just this, right? If I can do just this, how do we have that happen today? Because we don't have the money of Solomon or money of the Tsar of Russia in 1700. But how does this apply to us today? How do we sort of seek out pleasure and wealth in a similar way?
If I can just get this, then I'll be satisfied. If I can just get this new car, then I'll be satisfied. If I can just get to this point in my career, then I'll be happy. But the problem is, if you're not satisfied with where you're at, you will never be satisfied with anything more.
And you withheld not his heart from any good. In other words, you get what everyone did.
Uh-huh. Others?
That's good to be king.
And you can hear about, I don't know how much credit card debt there is in America, but it's a gigantic, like $1 trillion or something, several trillion. But I dare say most of that stuff that's involved on there is probably in storage buildings.
Should very well come in.
Put it in storage.
What does he find out in all of this? Verse 11 probably would be where we would look. Yeah, no profit. And he said, I looked on all the works that my hand had done. And there's work here. Like he's actively pursued getting this and planting trees. I doubt he was the one planting trees, but he might have been. But there was work that had to be done to even get what he needed or desire what he needed, whatever you want to say. But he said, on the labor which I had toiled, and indeed vanity. And this is the second time we've seen this, that he says vanity. And in the New King James, it says grasping for the wind. I want you to think about that term for just a second. Grasping for the wind. Every single one of you tonight can go out here and grasp at wind. Will you catch it? You will not, right? You will not catch it. You can gather up, you could take a bell jar or a bell plath. You could take a mason jar or a ball jar and you could fill it up with with air here and in Denver, Colorado, and Alaska and Africa, it's going to be the exact same, right? The stuff that you smell is all, you don't have anything right there. He says grasping at, you can go out here tonight and you can spend a lot of time grasping at wind, right? You can make several efforts, but you won't accomplish anything. He said there was no profit in it, nothing gained from it. We talk about this in our government class about profit, right? And we talk about profit. That's the money you make extra after you spent all of that. Well, there's no profit there. He spent a lot of time. He spent a lot of effort. He spent a lot of money, and he has nothing to show for it. It's that stuff, but it didn't make him happy. How is the thoroughness of this quest brought out?
He had access to everything. He said, I tried it all. So there's nothing I did not try.
So I think this is interesting, and I said this a minute ago, but you are not the king. And no matter what your bank account says, it paled in comparison to Solomon. So if the person who had all the money and all the ability sought it out and couldn't get it, why do we think that we would be able to achieve it with our limited funds, right? But we still pursue. People still seek after those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. You'd burn out a highlighter if you highlighted all the I's that you had in chapter 12 or chapter 2 right there. Anyone else on this? There's more to say. I'm just asking a couple of questions for each one so we can go through a little quicker, but feel free to comment and add more, whatever you want. This is Ecclesiastes 2, verses 12 through 17. You want to read it?
Why do we continue that pursuit? Are we just dumb? I'm serious. We must all be incredibly dumb because most, by and large, we just continue that, not in the grand scale.
Mm-hmm.
But most people really have, they're bottom out, they need something more, a different life, a different job, a different car, a different, we do that.
Well, it'll work for me. You just didn't do it right. It'll work for me. Yeah.
I think the biggest part of it is that people have this hope in it. And they're desperate to try anything to feel it, to satisfy it, to get that love or whatever that hole is there. But they don't realize that it's not in here the world. It's not in the world. It's in God. It's in the spiritual realm. But we try to satisfy it in the physical realm, and it will never work. But we're so desperate that we'll try anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Depending on what they say, it's like we've been trying to strive to do something that would make us happy. It takes the time out of our things, and like on the earth we have very limited time. So what we could possibly be doing, that's all wasted. It's just trying to do something that more than likely will not make us happy.
Such a lot. You're in, but you don't sometimes realize that till after it's over, right? You know, there was you realize sometimes like, oh, that was a waste of time. You know, when you've done this or that. Mary. Yeah. We mentioned that. I don't know if you were in here, but we mentioned that at the very beginning about that there can be a sort of negative reading of the book of Ecclesiastes, that kind of a defeatist reading. It's easy to read chapters 1 and chapter 2 and say, well, I just quit. I'm not doing anything. And I think Mary's approach is a lot more realistic. What can I pursue, right? What can I afford? And maybe you've used that word afford in many different ways without harming my family, or taking, what can I do without taking time away from something else, or whatever it might be. Tom? Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
He'll tell us later on, probably won't hear class speaking there, but go ahead and enjoy it. Go
Right.
ahead and do these things.
Right.
Life is fleeting, but don't let these be your goal, or let these be where you're trying to get your happiness from.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with getting joy from them, but that's can't be the source.
I think that's why, as far as stuff goes, the older you get, the less you want.
Yeah.
See, $5.
Connie? Yep.
I think it was Rockefeller on his deathbed. They asked him, said, if you could have time back and you could do anything in the world, what would you want to do? He said, I want to make $1 more million. That's sad.
Kind of a negative. That's right.
That's your wish, is make another $1 million to lose for somebody else.
Right. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 12 through 17. Maria, do you care to read this? And I think there's 2 slides here too. Oh, I guess it's not continued right there. Sorry. So, wisdom and folly, and there's a couple of things here that I want to look at. I actually want to go back for just a second. He says a couple of things here to look at. For what can the man do who succeeds the king? What does it mean here to succeed? To come after, to follow, right? And so it says only what he has already done. So whoever's going to come after Solomon, Solomon's done everything. And then so what can the person who succeeds him do? So you're already looking at this like, I can't do any more than this, just a little bit. It says the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. It's well written, I think, right there, because then he says, yet I perceive that the same event happens to them all, right? You know, we can walk through here with the lights off. We can walk through here with our eyes closed. We can walk through here with our eyes open. But the same thing may happen all the way through. He said it happens to the fool as it also happens to the wise. Yes. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Sure. Right. Yeah.
See that in Egyptian too. The kings, a lot of the pharaohs that would come after them would go in and strike out, and chisel out the other king's accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
Because he don't want people to remember that. He want people to remember that. He may have done it before they agree.
This is a trope's not the right word, but it's sort of a political thing as well, even today. That something that was tried 100 years ago, well, that didn't work. But about 180 years or 100 years later, it's like, well, let's try it again. You know, it'll work this time without really, and, you know, and then we're in the middle of something that was done maybe 100 years ago. And 20 years from now, it's like, well, that was dumb. We shouldn't have done that. Let's go try this. There's like four things we just circle around through. But what happens is you have people that have passed, right? The people that didn't experience that. And so when you have an experience, like, give it a shot there, as it were. What's the author's comparative evaluation of wisdom and folly? How does he, I guess, compare the two? Yeah. Yep. Others. Anytime you're comparing things, you're sort of taking the good and bad of both, right? And I would say for most of us, we would rather have more things on the wisdom side than the folly side, right? But sometimes we learn more from the folly side than we learn from the wisdom side there as well. Mm-hmm. I've told the story before, and it's not a safe one necessarily, but whenever we were learning to drive, I was driving and Dad was the passenger. Mom had refused to be a passenger with us. She put all that teaching on Dad. But Dad and I were in that Maplewood subdivision. If you've been to Maple Avenue Church of Christ, it's where Boo lives, but back and through there, and there's a bunch of streets, and it was a good place to go practice. Well, a friend of mine, he lived back there with his parents, and when you come out of it, there's a stop sign. And we're coming up to that stop sign, and I'm driving, and I see him and his mom and dad walking. And I was waving, look at me, I'm driving, waving real big. And before I knew it, I was halfway down Maple Avenue. I went right through that stop sign, didn't even look. And Dad was like, stop sign right there. It's like, it sure was. Well, I can tell that story funny now. Because I tell you the truth, every time I have ever been back there, I noticed that stop sign. But there was some humor, I guess, in the story. But we can learn from that there as well. But no matter the case here, we see it. So why is even wisdom then not necessarily satisfying? Yeah, you might.
You're all going to come to the same fate. You're all going to die. You can be wise and still lose every dime you got. You can be a fool and still lose every dime you got.
Mm-hmm. he said, I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For all is vanity. And again, he says, for grasping at the wind.
There's been 10 million houses probably burned down in the world because people thought they were electricians.
Yeah,
I'm serious.
sure.
They've been better on that spot.
Yeah.
They thought they had wisdom. They've been better off. I just did it. I need to home. And they would stay in their house. And they would just walk along. Sometimes you can't do that. I'm not a mechanic. I can't repair my transmission. I have to, and I think I'm not married. Sometimes you don't know anything about transmission.
Yeah.
Okay. I think they make fun of me.
Right. Sure. Others? We're progressing nicely. We've got a couple more things to look at. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 18 through 23. Deb, do you care to read this?
Yeah, I hated all my labor, which I'm taking. You know whether he shall be a wise man or fool, yet shall he have rule over all my labor, wherein I have labored, and wherein I have shown myself wise unto the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair all the labor which I put under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity, yet to the man that hath not labored, therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and great evil. For what hath man of all his labor and his vexation of the heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days of sorrow and real grief, yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity.
So, considering here, I guess, human labor. So the work that we have to do. And I think this, I want to be careful here because we would also read that we are instructed to work. And I said at the beginning that we can read this in sort of a defeatist attitude. And it would be easy to read this and say, there's really no need to work because I can't get anything done. So why does the author see that hard work and accumulation of wealth on the part of a wise man does not provide ultimate satisfaction? Maybe break that down into two parts. The hard work and accumulation of wealth. What is he talking about there?
Well, one, you can't take it.
Okay.
And you have no say on what the person that comes after you is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Work, strip, and save up millions in the bank account, and then y'all little kid or parents to get it, just blow it all.
Uh-huh. Yep.
This is what's the point of living?
Yep. Others? So the hard work and the accumulation. So again, if we read this in a defeatist sense, I'm going to quit work tomorrow, right? So what's the purpose then of continuing to work? What's the purpose of accumulating? And don't use that word negatively, but just what's the purpose of our labor? What's the wisdom in our labor? If I know that, like Ben said, my Yahoo kid is going to blow it all 10 minutes after I'm dead. What's my reason for continuing?
The good part of it, the happiness, the joy that could come out of it is when you do your labor for the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing it to leave behind or whatever. You're doing it for the church to help your kids, provide for your kids, and you get joy out of it that way. Not by wondering, okay, are they going to be good stewards? No. You're doing it for the Lord. You're surrendering it to Him for His kingdom, for His church, like Solomon, building His temple and His houses and everything else. And if you focus on who you're doing it for, I think you'll find pleasure. But if you focus on something different, like He is, what's going to be the end result of it, then you can lose that joy.
Mary was saying to an answer to a different question a while back that your work and your pursuit is something that can be rewarding and enjoyable, but don't let that be your sole goal of it. If that's pretty much what she said. Yes.
I think too, you can accumulate for yourself, and so you can have a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And like Ben said, you can also make it to the church, you can hold cemeteries, you can go about doing good, and maybe have a little bit of retirement.
Uh-huh.
Because you're not going to have to quit. That's
Right.
But you can, it's nice to enjoy your grandchildren playing golf and stuff like that.
Right.
You get to do things like that. Fun things. Go to the nursing home, visit people, things like that. There's a million good things that we can do. And I think hard when you're young, you got a better chance of doing that. If
Right.
you slow up around until you're 50, and then you say, well, I'm going to buckle down there too late.
Yeah. Others? No others?
And work is very, very satisfying.
Yeah.
Anybody that's ever worked and draw paper, like most of us are working like this, it's very satisfying. You get the job done, you do a good work, you do a good thing, you feed your family, you clothe your family, you have a place to live. That's very rewarding.
Yeah. There have been several times, I mean, teach for as long as I have, that you have students in class that cannot make an A. Cannot make an A. Just nobody, they will just never make an A. But I have felt more accomplished at times as a teacher when they made a C. Now, if it had been another kid in the class, I'd have called their mom and I'd have been willing to beat them upside the head because they shouldn't have been. But for some, that was a great accomplishment. And I think Mary said a minute ago, she said you have to look at things in degrees, right? And sometimes our accomplishments, what we accomplish, what we accumulate, be the most, but maybe the best that we could do in that case. I was reading something here recently, and it was a guy. He played lacrosse, and some of you may know what it is, a stick and ball sport. But the boy at the end, he told his father, he said, "Well, we got beat," and the father said, "No, you were there." And sometimes we look at everything as sort of a win and a loss, when sometimes it's being there and being the participant in it is more. And I don't know if that works exactly right here, but there is a sense of like being satisfied and grateful for what we have accomplished. And I don't think that at the beginning, what Solomon is talking about, he's working even more just to try and pile even more up. And we have to find sort of grateful. We can use what we've got, but we're not overburdening ourselves to the point where we get so much we can't do anything with it. I think this is the last bit for tonight. So we'll finish with this. This is just one slide here. Ecclesiastes 2, 24 to 26. Sue Ann, since it's your birthday, you get rewarded with getting to read the last one. I think we start to see, as the writing goes here, a change in Solomon. I think these last three verses will turn into something that we'll talk about on Sunday. You may have already turned and noticed that the first chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, is a time for every season, and he rattles off a bunch of things. But I think there's a sense of change that's perhaps happening as he writes this. And I want to look at this question to finish things up. What is set forth here as being necessary for the enjoyment of life? Say again, Ben, I'm sorry. God?
Apart from God, who can eat or who can have enjoyment?
Yep. If we look at verse 24, yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Sure. So I think in verse 24, the enjoyment of what we've done, and we should, and I hope that's our lesson leaving tonight, is that we should enjoy what we've done. I'm not saying you're going to love your job. That's just the nature of things. And as we were talking about, Sue Ann and I a minute ago at the start of church, that sometimes you're just kind of done with the job. And that's part of it as well. But we should enjoy the fruits of the labor, but not make the labor the only thing that our life is. And there are people that their whole life is work. And that can be, that they've sacrificed way too much just for that. Anybody else to wrap things up? We're going to stop right here. As I said, on Thursday, on Sunday, Sunday morning's class, we will go a little bit further in this. So hopefully you'll be back for that here this weekend.
It just wasn't going to be, okay? I just don't have that intellect or that physical ability. And that's okay. I'm a poster child,
Mhm.
That's okay. I'm a husband. I'm probably not the best husband, probably not the best dad. But you work at it, though. You do the best you can. But you're probably not going to be the very best. I'm not the best provider. Not a lot of them. But you have to find contentment somewhere.
Right.
Hopefully, we find some that are.
Others with thoughts on that? That's a good thing to sort of go home with, is contentment as well. We'll stop there and we'll continue on a Sunday morning. As we conclude here this evening, grateful for you all for being here, and thank you so much for the role that you all play in the class. It makes it a lot easier if I go through